ecological infrastructure is nature's equivalent to built infrastructure and basically describes naturally functioning ecosystems that deliver important services to people. Oops. Strategic water source areas in particular contain a suite of ecological infrastructure that support the provision of a disproportionate amount of fresh water to South African rivers, which are actually the lifelines of our economy and also the people. So deterioration of these water resource areas can have a disproportionate effect or negative impact on the people in the region. We have 22 strategic water source areas in our country. 11 of them have been prioritized on a national basis. And just to illustrate their importance, they occupy 8% of the land area of South Africa, South Africa, Eswatini, and Lesotho, and they provide 50% of our runoff. They support 50% of our population, 64% of our economy, and also 70% of our irrigated agriculture. So I don't need to convince, I think, the people in the room, but these areas are vital for food, water, economic, and energy security. 2 of these water source areas sit so very well positioned in the Garden Route Biosphere Reserve. There's the Outeniqua Strategic Water Source Area, which is situated in the southeastern region of the Western Cape and supplies water to the Garden Route and towns such as George and Mossel Bay. And then Tsitsikamma, in the southwest part of the Eastern Cape, supplies water to Outeniqua and the 𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐵 and provides 70% of the water to the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. So again, just illustrating the importance of these areas, and water resource governance and management within these swasas is complex and requires a collective landscape approach. And that's where the Swasa project came into being. So it's a partnership between the Garden Route Biosphere Reserve, WWF, and with financing from the Green Trust Fund. And the primary outcome was to improve the security of the Outeniqua and Tsitsikamma swasas, while at the same time establishing the basis for a future water source partnership. The objective was to promote improved governance of water resources at a landscape scale by facilitating collaboration and learning with multiple stakeholders from a diversity of sectors and levels. So we're talking national, we're talking provincial, we're talking local, we're talking agriculture, we're talking forestry. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is how we went about developing a shared understanding, developing the structures for a governance network, for collective or collaborative decision-making and collective action. And we did this through developing a social learning network and a knowledge project, which Dr. 𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐤 led for me, and then also a working group, which had 2 spin-off task teams. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So to start off with, I think the most important thing that we did was undertook a very rigorous stakeholder analysis. It was to understand the dynamics of the network of stakeholders and the working group participants in water resource management in the Outeniqua and Tsitsikammas. We used a diversity of analysis methods. We went for meta-identity analysis, social network analysis, knowledge flow mapping, relational analysis, power and influence matrices, as well as interest tables. We initially put out a call for interest to over 600 people, drawn from a variety of databases, but primarily that of the Garden Route Biosphere Reserve. And over 305 responded to that initial call, saying that they would be interested. And we sent them then an invitation to quite a lengthy online survey. We got 56 responses to that survey, and hence that's informed the rest. So we also, after analyzing all the stuff, we did present it to the network members to get their input. Are we right? Are we wrong? Are we, going on the right track? Have we assumed you in this sector when you're not? Just to make sure that we were doing it correctly. So the first thing we did was a meta-identities analysis. And that is really just grouping like-minded people in terms of their roles, expectations, their values, their rights, their responsibilities, and their needs. But what this provided us was it helped us to identify gaps in our representativity. It also helped us to monitor the diversity of representation in the process. And through this process, this exercise, we realized we were poorly representing agriculture, for example. We realized tourism was not at the table, but it helped us to identify those gaps. We also went on and did a social network analysis, and that was really to understand knowledge flows, identify knowledge sources, identify stakeholders who might be isolated from the knowledge flows, and those who are brokers and keepers of knowledge and information. And essentially, again, it helped us identify key and isolated stakeholders who should be encouraged to participate. We used out-degree centrality and in-degree centrality, out-degree being a measure of gregariousness, in-degree being a measure of popularity, and that helped us to determine the role that those individuals were particularly playing. We also did, as I said, a relational analysis using an actor linkage matrix, where we asked participants to categorize their relationship with others. Is it a relationship of conflict? Is it a relationship of cooperation? What is your relationship with these other people in this sector and in this area of interest? And this obviously helped us to become aware of important relationships that existed, relationships that could be facilitated where there were white gaps, no relationship, and also those that need repair. So it helped us understand and handle sensitively those engagements where there were maybe conflicting agents in the room. Have I skipped? Power and influence matrices. There we categorized the stakeholders according to being a subject, being a key player, being a crowd, or being a context setter. And we also asked them about what are their biggest interests? What are you most worried about in this landscape? And this method really helped us identify key players and the context setters. So that informed who we invited to the working group, okay? It also helped us identify who are the vulnerable, who are going to be affected by the decisions that come out of this process, and also to understand their interests and motivations. And interestingly enough, governance and management, and I think it was water quality, were top of the list of interests. So after undertaking this quite a rigorous stakeholder analysis, it took time and effort. We then established a social learning network, which was really designed to be a network of partners that contributed towards the management and governance of the SWASs through their own practice. We want to see that they learn and change and move on and adapt their practices. What we hoped to achieve out of that was relationship building, community cohesion, reframing of problems and creating a space for innovation, as well as being able to transform knowledge and understanding and developing the capacity for change and experimentation with different ways of doing. And so the social learning network was quite well attended. We did start it during COVID. So the first events were actually online. We only transitioned to in-person events after the COVID period. But again, we spent a lot of effort in monitoring. We wanted to know, are we achieving what we want to achieve in these social learning networks? Is it resulting in social learning? What are we actually doing here? So we undertook quite a rigorous monitoring and evaluation process with post-engagement questionnaires, which asked both closed-ended questions as well as open-ended questions to get overall impressions of the engagements after every engagement. We started a working group, and that then spun off 2 task teams. And this working group was designed to be a collaborative governance platform for planning and implementation. So it was attended by mandated government organizations and environmental authorities. And those were the context setters and the key stakeholders that we identified in the stakeholder analysis process. They're the ones who make the decisions. They're the ones who can make the decisions. So we put those individuals into the working group. And the working group serves as a forum for collaborative partnership to drive an ecological, sustainable, innovative, and action-orientated landscape approach for the conservation of the SWASs. And we hoped that this working group would result in collaborative governance, coordination, monitoring and evaluation, and adaptation. They collaboratively developed terms of reference, where they aimed to facilitate water security by being local level platform for cohesion and alignment with provincial and national strategies and action plans. They wanted to promote sustainable ecological management, to mitigate against environmental degradation, and to put processes in place to adapt and build resilience against environmental risk through collaborative governance. And lastly, to be a forum and community of practice that promotes knowledge sharing and adaptive management for landscape level implementation. They've gone through 2 years of meeting with each other. It's been a long process of building trust, getting to know each other, understanding what each other is interested in and what is important to each other. But through this process, they also undertook a bit of a mapping exercise and prioritized particular areas within each of the strategic water source areas. And those being in the Western Cape, the K30C catchment, which is the 𝐵𝐼𝐺𝐻 Garden Route Dam catchment, and 𝐵𝐴𝐺𝐵𝐼𝐧, and in the Eastern Cape, the Crom River catchment. The next steps, we're due to meet in November again, and the next steps is to start formulating the priority actions for those priority areas. What needs to take place in those landscapes? Oops. And again, we monitored these engagements after every working group. We begged and pleaded for all the participants, please fill out yet another questionnaire. They were very good at it, very good, and really participated in that. And again, we asked them very close-ended questions, very open-ended questions, and got a sense of whether we were actually achieving adaptive management through this entity. We then also established, well, it actually came from the network. The network made a call, and they said, please, we don't know what we know and don't know. We don't know what knowledge is out there. So we also put together a bit of a knowledge project, and the primary aim for that was to undertake a review of the knowledge relating to the extent, the condition, the functioning of these key ecological infrastructures, as well as the governance arrangements. Who are the players in this zoo? Okay. And it was essentially a synthesis of knowledge about and in the strategic water source areas. Coupled to this, we also consulted a lot of what we called our knowledge partners, and we had a knowledge partner workshop where we asked people what research should be prioritized and where are the gaps, what don't we know. The outcomes, or what we wanted to achieve with this, what we called the State of Knowledge project, was to make information and knowledge accessible for more and better informed decision-making, and also to help us identify gaps in knowledge. So this is where researchers, you can all wake up now. So we had a couple of outputs. We've got a synthesis report, which is a real summary of the big comprehensive report. The synthesis report has been published, it's out, it's available on our website, and I've brought a couple of hard copies if anyone would like to take one home. The comprehensive report is at the printers as we speak. I was really hoping to bring some of those with me too, but not quite. So I'm expecting those to land on my desk in the next couple of days, and that will also be accessible. Coupled to the reports is a repository. There were over 356, I think, sources of information that Sam drew from, and those have been made accessible through a literature repository, which is again available on our website. So it's, and some of them have firewalls, but it's essentially just showing you where that information is. You can search it. You can ask, give me all the research on the Outeniqua, or give me all the research on this one little river, but it just makes it more accessible for everyday people as well. And at this point, I would also like to just make a special acknowledgement to the late David 𝐵𝐿emaitri. Not only did his academic career help us and was instrumental in developing our understanding of strategic water source areas, but he also kindly contributed a great amount of time and guided us during the early phases of this project. So I miss him, I miss his contributions, and thank you, David. So for the researchers, the knowledge gaps that came out of this State of Knowledge process were that we need to understand more about the barriers and the opportunities for integrated fire management. That was one topic that came up. The other was understanding of the land use changes in the face of external drivers like economic trends and climate change and their impact on the swasses. There's been a lot of change, and particularly in the agriculture sector. For example, the Potensi region has now gone all the way to citrus. They're growing grapefruits and oranges and lemons. And we're seeing a greater surgence of macadamia nuts and avocado. And we don't truly understand the impact of that yet. So we need to dig a little bit deeper into that. Furthermore, a big call has been for an alternative financial or financing mechanisms and control models for alien invasive management. One thing I'm hearing a lot about is that our metrics don't make sense to financiers. And if we want financiers and people to invest in these strategic water source areas in our ecological infrastructure, we need to provide metrics that make sense to them. And again, with our alien clearing models, we really need new models that are not focused on man days, but are actually focused on ecological infrastructure. We also need to develop an understanding of the extent, condition, and functioning of wetlands, and particularly groundwater. We know there's groundwater, but we don't know how much, we don't know what the state is, and that's a big gap in our knowledge. And when we're making these decisions around water, we're missing a big chunk of information. So again, that is something that we need to look into. And then lastly, data gaps in eco-status monitoring within the quaternary systems to establish a baseline for long-term monitoring. What we did discover through the working group stuff is some of the data is dated 2010. And we are planning alien clearing on 2010 data, yet there's also been this big fire that has also changed things. So are we making good informed decisions based on good data? And in some cases, not really. So those are the gaps in research. And I urge our academics and researchers to please pick up on these. And I hope to see them coming up. But really, the point I want to make in this whole presentation today, and why I said this is for the managers and the practitioners and not for the academics, is the value of a nuanced understanding of your stakeholders. When I look at the methods that we did, we were able to monitor the extent and diversity of our stakeholders. We were able to identify gaps in representativity. We were able to identify bridging agents and marginalized stakeholders, knowledge brokers and knowledge gatekeepers, key players and context setters, as well as the vulnerable. It gave us an understanding of our stakeholder interests and motivations and how to approach people. And it helped us become aware of the relationships that exist, that could be facilitated, and identify relationships that might need repair. And again, ongoing monitoring of our engagements was also invaluable. It helped us flag problems before they emerged. It helped us respond to the needs of our stakeholders in the program planning. So when we were planning a network engagement, we looked at what do our stakeholders need to hear, what do they want to hear, what are the questions that they are asking, and how can we deliver on that? And it also helped us know whether the mechanisms we were using, social learning network and an adaptive co-management working group, were they actually achieving that? And so the main point I want to make is the value of understanding your stakeholders and truly digging deep and listening to them. So looking forward, funding. Our funding has now dried up. We really need to find some more funding for this project to keep it going. Robin is our co-chair on the working group, and we've been having big conversations about that as well, including his work with BOCMA and how to bring them into the fold and potentially integrate. And so funding is a big priority for us. I would also like to see the development of a citizen science monitoring program, which we can then pilot in these priority areas to help us monitor and evaluate the efforts of the projects that take place there. And lastly, an urge for our researchers and academics to take up on the research themes. Thank you very much.